Hi guys, welcome back. Today's YouTuber is The Butterfly Effect, plant-based weight loss, and the name of her video is Weigh In Wednesday. I think you're going to really enjoy this.
Hi guys, it's Heather, and today is a Wednesday, and that makes it Weigh-In Wednesday. And so that is the day that I make a video and I tell you how everything's going and how my weight is going and how I'm doing on my journey to go from my highest weight, which was 436 pounds a few years ago, down to my goal weight, which would be 136 pounds for a total of 300 pounds off. And the last time I weighed in, I weighed 148 pounds, which is 288 pounds off. So almost to the 300 pound off goal. And it was, I think I had taken off about 12 pounds in July, sorry. And so now this is the month end for August. I purposely decided that I wanted to not weigh in this month because I wanted to focus on my health and healing. I just had surgery. I had a couple of surgeries. I had some complications. And so health has been my focus this month more than weight. Sometimes people will say that they're taking off weight for their health. They go vegan and maybe they even go raw vegan. The next thing I know, they say, I'm trying the HCG diet, or I'm trying keto, or I'm trying Atkins. And they had been saying that they were, vegan for the animals. And it seemed like they really believed that this is the optimum diet for humans, which is what I believe, because all the evidence points that way. Vegans live 8 years longer. Vegans have 90% less coronary artery disease, heart attacks, and strokes. 90%. It's very hard to argue with 90%. They think that vegan, the plant-based diet with its rich emphasis on fruits and vegetables is a very protective diet and could cut about 80% of cancers. To me, it's hard to swallow that people who are really focused on their health are not eating a plant-based diet.
So obviously she's doing some amazing things. She's lost darn near 300 pounds. She looks like somebody that, from her neck up, I would have never thought that she weighed 300 pounds additional to whatever she weighs here. Obviously, she's doing it in a vegan, plant-based diet sort of way. But there's one problem with vegans. They have a quit rate of about 85%. So even if you start off vegan, you very rarely finish off as a vegan.
You guys know that I went from this. Hang on just a sec. I got a poster made for Chef AJ's event because I'm going to go. So this is my before. So here she is in all her glory. And notice, like in my hand, it says Vegas. That's because we took these in Vegas. So it's going to be so cool to come back to Vegas full circle. That's one of them. Okay. So the plant-based diet did obviously help me take off weight. And it will help you take off weight. They say the people that eat the most veggies, there's studies that show that it's correlated with the lowest BMI, the lowest body mass index. And so if you want to be healthy, you should really eat a plant-based diet. And so, it isn't just about getting skinny for me at all. And maybe that's partly because maybe that's partly because I'm older and that ship's kind of already sailed for me. And if it is just about being thin and looking good for you, the animals don't care why you're not eating them. They're just happy you're not eating them, right? We should be nice to each other. Don't only be nice to animals, be nice to people too.
Hey, I agree. I think you should actually be more nice to people than animals, because believe it or not, other than dogs and cats, most animals don't give two poops about you. But if you're a vegan, I totally respect you. I do love animals, including cats and dogs, believe it or not. So I'm really impressed with her weight loss here, close to 300 pounds. She's also doing something for her mental health by staying away from the scale. Sometimes I think a lot of venters like to get on that scale once every other day or even once a day. Sometimes it's really good to like maybe hit the scale once a month so you're not stressing over it all the time. So obviously she lost 300 pounds here, but like I said earlier, there's one problem with the vegan diet.
When I made that last video last October, I had no intention of it being like my last video for this long. I can't even believe that it's almost been a year. And so, wow, it's so cool to be back. You're probably wondering why I stopped making videos. And if you're looking at this video, you can probably get a clue. It was because I had gone from what the original intention was of making this channel, which was to get support for my own journey to take off 300 pounds, to becoming somewhat of a person who thought that she knew what she was doing and people asking me for advice. And that was just making me really uncomfortable because I was struggling during that time, right? So I reached my goal weight on October the 18th, 2017, and I maintained it for only a couple months before I started going back up on the scale. You recall that there was a lot of stuff going on. I had surgery, had a couple of surgeries, just lots going on then.
Check this out. When I had surgery, I had the same situation where I went from like 160s to all of a sudden I was in the mid 180s. And all of a sudden my excitement for life went from up here to down here. So if she had multiple surgeries and she gained some weight, even if she gained quite a bit of weight back, I'm going to forgive her. She knows the plan to get her weight down to a reasonable number. But still, let's hear what she says here. I find this interesting that she gained it back.
Just lots going on then and lots going on now, right? So my last video I made, I had gained a lot of weight. I had gained over 100 pounds during that time. And I just handled it really poorly by just stopping telling you guys how much I weighed and just hoping you wouldn't, that would be a flattering angle or I don't know what I was thinking, but I was, I've always been honest that I still don't have all the answers at all. Let's see if this sounds familiar to any of you. I know what to do, but I don't always know how to make myself do it. And I was able to make myself do it for a really long time, right? And so I thought I had that down too. Weight loss journey is like being on a narrow path with a 3 or 4 foot drop on either side of it, right? Like if you take it for granted, if you start to allow exceptions, basically if you stop doing what you did to take off the weight, you find yourself right back down in that ditch.
Yeah, so let's talk about that real quick. So, do you guys ever find yourself in that situation where all of a sudden you're losing 15, 20 pounds, you start to feel really good about yourself, and before you know it, maybe a holiday or a birthday or a special occasion comes up, you have a little slip, a little extra dessert on top of what you normally would stop at, right? And all of a sudden, you're gaining that 10 or 15 pounds back and maybe even a little more. Now, the reality was she had lost 300 pounds and it looks like she gained back about 100 or so. So she didn't technically gain it all back. So that is good.
Right? The other side of it, though, is a beautiful thing. And that is you're only, if you've fallen in that ditch, you're only a couple of feet from being right back on track.
right? You don't have to sit there in the ditch and cry and think about how this is your life now, this is your ditch life, right? You can choose to get back on that track anytime you want to. And if you fall again, you have a choice. You can, again, sit in that ditch, or you can get right back on track.
She said, you can get right back on track whenever you want to. And then at the end, she said, you can get right back on that track. I think you should get right back on that track right now. So why don't you guys go get your shoes? Let's go for a walk. How beautiful that sky looks, Venters. Good morning. We live in a world that is full of beauty. The only problem is we're constantly focused on the ugly things of life. I don't know if you guys heard, but I believe it was in Brazil, or it was definitely in South America. They showed a video of this plane that just fell directly from top to bottom, and it hit the ground and exploded. And they were showing all these people around what looked like a little village, and apparently 61 or 62 people perished in this plane crash. Now, on the video that you saw from the news, they were showing villagers kind of looking at, it looked like a couple of heaps of fire and wreckage, right? But on YouTube, somebody showed a video where it actually showed the plane falling straight out of the air, and it looked freaky because you can kind of picture an airplane gliding to its doom, right? But this thing didn't glide. It was a plane that just went straight down while it was still facing forward. So it looked really odd, because my thinking is, shouldn't a plane still kind of go forward a little bit while it's coming down? If any of you guys have caught a glimpse of that video, I want you guys to share your thoughts on it, because if you guys see what I saw, it looked like one of the scariest things ever. And the speed at which it fell out of the sky, oh my God, creepy. I don't know about you guys, but I've heard different strategies that if you're in the back of a jet, not necessarily a little plane that holds 60 people, but if you're in the back of a jet, I hear, well, maybe, if it holds 60 people, there's probably a good chance it was a good-sized little jet, right? But the reality is, I've heard people say that the safest place that you can sit is back by the tail of the airplane, because I guess you have a better chance of survival if it's a catastrophic crash. But on movies that I watch, they always show the back part of the airplane break off and then people being sucked out the back of the cabin. Gosh. Speaking of which, did you guys see that video a couple months back where they did show the door of that airplane pop off? Oh my God. How freaking scary is that? I kind of got on a little UFO trip with regards to the videos that I've been watching this past week. And a lot of people are starting to say that, hey, maybe those aliens that we're seeing, the reason they always come and people get little glimpses of them and then they disappear is because they're probably time travelers from the future. Yeah! How cool is that? You know what's interesting though? I have a feeling that time travel to the past is not possible. So if those people are time travelers, I actually think they might be time travelers from the past rather than the future. So let's talk about this. Let's get a dialogue. Let's have a little fun, because it's just a fun subject. And right now, the sun is behind the clouds. And guys, it feels like about 90 degrees without sunlight rather than 102 degrees with sunlight. So it feels really nice. So let's get into this. I can't picture a world where through science and technology you can somehow pop into the past. I can picture a world, however, with science and technology where we can pop into the future. So those time travel machines that we're seeing, or excuse me, spacecraft or UFOs or UAPs, whatever you want to call them, I actually think there's a better chance that if they are time travelers, they're actually time travelers from the past. So Jesse, how the hell could that be possible? We already know what we've invented, but that's where we're wrong. I've been told that the military-industrial complex, right? The different third-party companies that we have that actually make our weapons here in the United States for war, I've been told that they're actually 20 years ahead of the rest of the world in technology. What that means to me is that if they had a breakthrough in time travel, there's a chance they could have had it over the last 20 years or so, and that's why we've been starting to see a lot of these videos from 2004, 2007, you know, these tic-tac videos and stuff that they're finally sharing with us. Why would you share something that could potentially, God, I can't talk this morning. This is so big. How can I say this? Imagine a world where our technology, we think it's current, and we think because we're in America, or maybe we're in Japan, or maybe we're in Great Britain, we think that we have the highest level of technology available. But the reality is, our military and the companies that comprise our military-industrial complex, they're actually 20 years ahead of the market. So what we know as the internet, the military had the internet 20 years before the rest of the public did. They're trying to develop these anti-gravity machines, and supposedly they mastered anti-gravity in the 40s, the 1940s. So what I propose is that we're actually quite a bit ahead of the technology that we think we're ahead of. Let me give you an example. People were starting to see the stealth fighter 10, 15 years before it actually became known. They actually had a Ross Coulthart special where he was talking to a woman who was kind of traumatized by a UFO experience. And when he asked her to draw what it was she saw, she drew what looked like a triangle and kind of, it looked like a spacecraft in the form of a triangle. So old Ross Coulthart pulls out some top secret unclassified or declassified materials, and he actually showed her the UFO that supposedly traumatized her life. And it did traumatize her. I think it would traumatize a lot of people, and it really affected her in a scary sort of way. But when Ross Coulthart pulled out a picture of this declassified craft, all of a sudden she was a little upset because she's like, that's what I saw. And a lot of times these UFO sightings truly are military vehicles. Because think about this, if you create some sort of crazy military jet, right? Or military spacecraft, guys, you can't just like create it and let it sit there inside of a mountain or inside of a bunker. You have to actually have pilots fly that bad boy. So what do? They create these areas like Area 51 where nobody's allowed to watch, nobody's allowed to videotape, nobody's allowed to enter, right? But the reality is, those are the places where people go out and they start staring at the sky, they start seeing stuff, and then they start telling themselves that, oh, I have the power to summon UFOs. Bullshit, you're by a military installation and you're seeing top secret military stuff that you shouldn't be videotaping. That's what I think's happening. So do I think these things are space-time travelers? Probably not. Because again, if they are, I don't think they would be time travelers from the future. I think they would be time travelers from the past, which is just even trippier than the future if you think about it. What if we do have time travel? But what if we didn't create it in the year 2100? What if we created it in the year 1950? And we're just starting to find out about it now. And when I say now, I mean over the last 15 or 20 years. We some way, somehow have the ability with our military sensors that we have on our military planes and stuff. We have these ways of actually detecting what previously was invisible and undetectable. So all of a sudden, imagine you have a military top secret project from, let's say, 20 or 30 years ago. They bounce into our timeline. So in other words, they bounce into the future, and all of a sudden they are seeing things. God, I can't talk today. I think we need to go to a new subject. It's just too much for my brain to handle. So anyway, guys, today is a really neat situation because I was watching the news, and the news was showing the 10-day forecast. And it looks like the hottest that it's going to get over the next 10 days is 107. So it's still going to be a lot of 105s, 106s, and 107s. But that's what I kind of envisioned in my head when I think of August. I think of a situation where, yes, it's still hot as heck, but it's a little bit colder or cooler. It's not colder at all. It's a little bit cooler than it was in July. I always feel like July is the hottest. Some people feel like August is just as hot, but my goodness, 107 is going to feel like heaven compared to 117. You know what I mean? So I'm really looking forward to that. Guys, today is your Sunday. I hope you're enjoying your Sunday. This is one of those days where I always wish we were set up more where we had 4-day work weeks with 3-day weekends. I think if we did that as a country, I think we would enjoy life a little bit more because, I don't know about you, this 5 days on, 2 days off that we've been doing forever, it never seems very fun because it always feels like the weekend starts and ends before you really get to enjoying it, you know? I've met a lot of friends through the years that have worked 4-10s where they did have 3 days off. And almost every single one of them told me that they enjoyed that type of shift better. Do you guys like the idea of working 4 days a week with 3 days off? Did you guys see the picture of the airplane that went down in Brazil? And again, I think it went down in Brazil. I know it went down in South America. Have you guys ever had family members that were affected by a plane crash? It's kind of interesting because they say that your odds of being in a car accident are just 10 times higher than being in a plane accident, that planes are relatively safe, right? And it's really true because every time a plane crashes, it definitely seems to make the news, right? But at the same time, we have more planes flying than ever before. And it is kind of shocking that we don't have a lot more plane accidents that do occur. And then when a plane does go down, it does seem rather dreadful, doesn't it? It's almost like you're guaranteed when a plane goes down that someone's going to perish, right? Because let's be honest, when a car is involved in an accident, I would say most of the time people survive. They might be maimed, they might be disabled for life, but they don't necessarily perish, right? I feel like if you're in an airplane and it's going down, you better start saying your prayers because you probably only have a couple moments left to live. And I don't know about you, but could you imagine being in a box up in the air, knowing that you're going to come land on the ground in a not so nice way? Oh my God, doesn't that sound like the scariest thing ever? I don't think that would be fun at all. And I think even if you did survive that, I think you'd be traumatized forever and I definitely wouldn't want to get in a plane again. But you know what's interesting? No matter what it is, it seems like people around the world, and maybe it's just human nature and the human spirit, no matter how scary the crash is, it seems like people almost always pick up that bike and get right back on it, right? I noticed with bull riders, if you ever listen to a biography of a bull rider, a lot of them have some horrific injuries, but they are just the bravest people in the world. They get right back on that beast and they go right back to doing what they love. Same with race car drivers. Sometimes race car drivers are in accidents where people actually do perish, right? And a lot of times they're able to get into these horrific accidents, walk away from it, and go right back to the racing circuit the next week, you know? It's like, holy moly, these people are really super. You know, it's funny, when you talk about athletes, a lot of people don't consider NASCAR drivers or race car drivers athletes. But I've seen some videos where they've actually put race car drivers through tests, like for their reaction time. Race car drivers have reaction times that are faster than professional boxers. Now tell me that's not scary. And I shouldn't say race car drivers. This one race car driver, they were showing some reaction skills they have. And the way they showed it was they had him hold his hands like this, and then another person put their hands underneath his, right? And they dropped a ball, and this guy had to go from above to below and catch a tennis ball. And the race car driver did it with like 100% accuracy. The NFL wide receiver that tried doing it with him could only catch it like 1 or 2 times out of 5. And I think that NFL player was a guy named Tyreek Hill from the Miami Dolphins. And so when you look at a football player, you think, okay, they have to have cat-like quick reflexes. And if you're going to talk about an NFL player that is really special when it comes to how fast they are, it's Tyreek Hill. I have very rarely seen a football player that's that fast other than maybe Deion Sanders or Randy Moss or Rocket Ismail. If you're not into sports, then all these names probably mean nothing to you. But I think you know that athletes have incredible reflexes and reaction time. This race car driver's reaction time was so much better and faster than Tyreek Hill's. It was scary. But at the same time, if you're a race car driver, you better have cat-like reflexes or you're going to be in trouble. So if there's anyone out there that needs to be blessed with those reflexes, it's a race car driver. I always marvel whenever you watch race car driving, it actually looks like they're going slow. And then they'll show a camera angle and they'll show cars whizzing by. And all you hear is fium, 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 fium. It's amazing. Now, I'm one of these guys that I never really liked music too super loud because I lived with an Uncle David who suffered from schizophrenia. And sometimes I can remember coming home as young as a 2nd or 3rd grader, and you could hear music coming from our house that was just ungodly loud. And it would be because my Uncle David was having like a weird episode. And it's so crazy because as an adult, I look back and I say, what was my mom thinking having me as a little boy growing up in this house with my Uncle David? But the reality was in the early 80s, when my Uncle David was suffering from schizophrenia, my other Uncle Jeff and my mom used to constantly talk about later in life that back then they didn't know how to diagnose him. Like they didn't really know that it was schizophrenia or manic depressive or some other sort of malady that maybe he was on drugs or whatever. But my Uncle David wasn't on drugs. And he didn't need alcohol and to get drunk to act really weird and bizarre. And if any of you guys have had family members that have dealt with mental illness, sometimes you see some pretty weird, crazy stuff. I'll never forget one time I was in the den. We have a tri-level house where you have, 2 stories above, 1 story below ground, right? And I'll never forget, one time I went down to the den and my Uncle David was taking a shower, so the door's closed and he's in there. And all of a sudden he did this horrific laugh. Sounded like Count to Count from Sesame Street. And he's making these horribly scary laughing sounds from inside the shower. And it was just the creepiest thing. So when I was little and my Uncle David wasn't medicated, oh my God, it was like living with the devil. Now, my Uncle Dave, I love, he's a great guy. When he was medicated, he was completely the most nice guy in the world. But when he was off his medication, he became progressively more and more weird, bizarre, and scary. Thankfully, somewhere in the mid-'80s, some doctors started diagnosing and saying, hey, this is obviously paranoid schizophrenia. Let's get this guy medicated. And whatever drugs they had him on, it worked because he started acting normal. The problem with the drugs were they sometimes made him lethargic, and sometimes you would ask him a question and he would just kind of stare off into the sunset. And it's like, David, Earth to David, are you there? So it's interesting because thank goodness my Uncle David wasn't some sort of weird pervert or crazy person when it came to how he acted around kids and stuff. But there are people that do act weird around kids. So I really feel for those little kids that have to grow up in situations where maybe their mom's working and they're stuck there living with people and family members. Because I'm sure we've all heard that a lot of times when bad things happen to kids growing up, a lot of times it's not complete strangers, it's actually family members, which is a real shame. And I'm sure, I can almost guarantee that out of all my females that watch this show, and even males too, I can almost guarantee some of you guys have had some family members, that weren't necessarily on the up and up and might have did some pretty foul things when they were younger. If you did go through that, I'm so sorry that you had to go through that trauma. Hopefully you have a forgiving heart, and hopefully you've been able to move on in a way that's productive, What's really sad is I think we've all met people that have had trauma in their life where they haven't really recovered, where they're afraid to leave their house, right? Where they have emotional problems, they can't keep a job. So whenever we do these horrible things to young people, the repercussions of it can go forward into the future. And in that way, we are touched by time travel, right? You do bad things to people, they're going to end up doing bad things to others later down the line. Has a horrible domino effect. By the way, I saw an ad yesterday that was saying that Walmart is selling GoPro 10s for $149. So if you're thinking about doing a walking channel like Walk Talk Vent, go to Walmart and pick up a GoPro for $149. There's one of those birds. Hey, there's one of those birds I was telling you about. That is a green parrot that obviously used to be, here, let me see how far I can get you. That parrot is not a typical bird. That is some bird that came from a store where you can buy tropical birds. So I do see those every now and then. So once again, about 5, 6, 7 years ago, there was a whole bunch of tropical birds that were flying through my neighborhood. When I saw them, I thought to myself, you know what? They're probably not going to live very long. I thought that the heat would eventually kill them off. But here we are 5, 6, 7 years later, and I still see a couple of those birds every now and then. Wouldn't that be crazy if they found a way to get a foothold in the community here, and if all of a sudden from this point on, there was always some of these green looking mini parrot type birds? That would be kind of cool. That's what's so neat about our neighborhoods. Guys, there's so many people nowadays that don't even know their next door neighbors. Could you imagine if you started a walking routine and you ended up meeting 2 or 3 neighbors that ended up becoming good friends? Could you imagine if you went out and all of a sudden you started noticing certain birds or certain animals in your neighborhood? There's a good chance that you guys, just like me, have some stray dogs in your neighborhood where the owners don't even know they're sneaking out of from underneath the fence. Like Pretty Girl, you guys might have that same situation. home. You know, this vehicle here has had that flat tire for probably going on a month. I should ask them if they want to sell that vehicle. You know, a lot of you guys are in situations where your grandchildren might want vehicles. If you can help purchase them a vehicle, oh my God, they would love you forever. Jesse, I don't think we should buy people's love. Yeah, but it happens all the time, Bob. People buy people's love all the time. All right, I'm going to show you guys something. Again, this is just irritating. This family put up a wall that's obviously been extended up. Why? Because the homeless people. And look how they're rewarded. They get rewarded with a bunch of graffiti on their back fence. It really blows me away that this is what people do with their time. They think to themselves, that wasn't me, trust me. They think to themselves, I'm gonna go buy some spray paint. Or maybe they go in their garage and they say, hey, I've got this old bottle of spray paint. I'm gonna go ruin people's fences. I'm gonna go spray paint someone's car. I'm gonna go let air out of their tire. It's just really weird to know that I literally have someone in the neighborhood here that sees it as their job to put graffiti on things. Oh my goodness. I wish I could catch them in the act. I would flip my camera on him and then I would freaking shame him for the rest of his days. I really would. I just can't believe people do that shit. It's interesting too, because those are the same people that complain when people do them wrong. Talk about being disrespected, right? And then they're out there spray painting stuff on people's properties. It's just awful. Usually before I leave the house, I take like a big gulp of water. Like if I have a bottle of water, I'll usually down about half of it before I leave. But for some reason, I wake up in the morning and I just feel like I got a ton of spit in my mouth and a ton of boogers in my nose. Oh my goodness. I don't know what's going on today. We are in the twilight zone. I feel like my camera just went off, but I don't know if it was off that whole time or what. Holy moly, I think somebody upstairs doesn't want me making a video today. All right, so let's talk about that. Sometimes days just don't go the way you envision. Sometimes you have to bust out a plan B, and sometimes when it comes to your day, you don't necessarily have a plan B. So what do you do when your best friend that you were supposed to go to the movies to cancels on you? What do you do when your kids have a flat tire and decide, hey mom, we'll get together next weekend? You just gonna do nothing, Ethel? Heck no, put on your walking shoes, let's get outside and let's walk some calories off. Guys, this is why you gotta make walking your habit, because sometimes you're gonna be irritated. Today has been a very irritating day. I can't speak very well. The things in my mind are so jumbled that I can't quite spit them out. I sound like some guy that's having trouble talking. But the reality is sometimes we have too many things in our mind. And sometimes the best way to get rid of that clutter, just like cleaning your clutter-filled house, is to clean your head out. How do you do that, Jesse? Bob, you put your shoes on, you go for a walk, you quit talking, and you start thinking about things. And you ponder things. And you ask yourself, how can I overcome this this hurdle? How can I find a solution for this problem? And many times the best way to find a solution to a problem is just to kind of think about it. Put it up there in your thoughts, and then just kind of continue with your walk. And a lot of times, a couple of hours or a couple of days later, you'll come up with some idea that you never could have thought of while sitting in front of the TV eating junk food. I'm telling you, there are some real therapeutic applications that we achieve when we walk. We are able to really get rid of a lot of stress and a lot of clutter. And just like pack rats have a lot of clutter in their home, and believe me, I have some rooms in my house that are completely empty, completely void of clutter, but I have other areas in my house where it's like, Jesse, get rid of some of this clutter. But sometimes it's hard for us to get rid of old things. We tell ourselves, oh, this has sentimental value, or my God, to throw something like this away is crazy. What we really need to do is take those items to the Goodwill so somebody else could use them. It's really weird. We have a lot of these little hang-ups. One of the hang-ups that a lot of us get is this need to clean our plate, right? That was one of the first hang-ups we had. Some of us have hang-ups when it comes to washing our hands. Have you ever seen these people with OCD where they have to wash their hands 35 or 40 times a day? Sometimes they have to do it 13 or 14 times in a row, like a secret handshake. I think that's what happens to the human brain. We'll call it a computer. When the bandwidth starts to lessen, when all of a sudden it's filled up with too much memory. Sometimes you got to let that stuff go. Like we were talking about the other day, if you have a boyfriend or girlfriend that when you were 18, 19, or 20, you feel like they kind of ruined your life and set you down a pathway of misery. Man, you're in your 40s or 50s now. It's time to forgive that teenage kid. You know what I mean? To hold your life in the responsible hands of some 18 or 20-year-old kid from 30 years ago seems kind of wrong. And a lot of times that's what your boy did. A lot of times I said, oh my God, my life sucks because, the mother of my child did me wrong. You know what? If your mother of your child or the father of your child does you wrong and you end up splitting ways, that's not a horrible thing like we think it is. It's a blessing. Could you imagine if I would have married my daughter's mom and all of a sudden all these horrible stories I'm telling you, could you imagine if they would have happened not before we ever got married, but could you imagine if they would have happened after we got married? All of a sudden you have to decide, do I really want to be with this person? Because when we broke up, she actually started dating a lot of our coworkers and a lot of our friends. So it really put me in a humiliating situation. Because all of a sudden, there's a lot of people that'll say, hey, me and my husband used to have a lot of mutual friends. And when we broke up, those mutual friends took the side of my husband. So in addition to losing my husband and his side of the family, I lost a lot of our mutual friends. You ever heard stories like that? I've heard a ton of them. And that's the thing. I didn't lose our friends. They were literally seduced. They were seduced by my ex, And I'll never forget one day I was walking down Mill Avenue by Arizona State University. And Mill Avenue at the time was just a place where a lot of people congregated and walked up and down, just basically looking at other people. And this was kind of a tradition back in the day that teenagers and young adults would be on Mill Avenue. And I'll never forget one day I saw my ex walking by with one of my friends that I thought was a friend. He was a coworker too, named Nima. And I'm like, okay, now you know where you stand with Nima. And it was just really embarrassing because here I am staring down this guy, almost ready to come to blows with him. And really, it wasn't on him. It was on her. Some people, when they decide they're gone, they're out of your life, and they go out of your life in a way that can be really hurtful. We've all had situations where people move on faster than us. Oh my God, that can be devastating. But again, although when I was going through it, it literally seemed like the worst possible thing that could happen to me ever, it really was a blessing. And you know what? She's the reason that I started this YouTube channel, because I found out that she ended up taking on a weight loss surgery, and she also ended up taking on Wegovy. Her weight loss surgeon decided not only to do the surgery with her, but to give her this Wegovy. And so every now and then I'll ask my daughter, how's your mom doing? Because I'm doing the channel where I'm always trying to find out about side effects. And apparently her mom has had a surgery to remove excess skin, and she's just had a lot of complications with it. Am I happy about those complications? No, I'm really not. I would like the mother of my child to have a nice life. But before she went through the weight loss surgery, she did balloon up to probably, and I'm not even exaggerating, probably 300 pounds. And there was a little piece of me, I'm not proud about this, but there was a little piece of me that said, gotcha, bitch. Sometimes people have things coming to them. And honestly, when I was 18 and 19, the way I was treated by her was very, very cruel. I wouldn't wish that on any 18 or 19-year-old kid. When you're 18, you're considered an adult, right? But when you're 40 and you look back at how you were when you were 18, guys, we were kids. We truly were. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but If you have an 18-year-old in front of me, no matter how big and strong he or she looks, I'm still looking at them for what they are. They're an 18-year-old kid. And when I was 18, the way that breakup went down, was just really traumatizing and horrific. So again, am I the only one that's gone through a breakup like that where your heart is broken? No, I think that happens to probably most of us at one point or another in our lives. But guys, I'm telling you, the way we view it is wrong. We view it as something horrible, and it truly is at the time. But guys, it's really a gift. You can't force people to be in your life. The best revenge is success. So if you really want to show those people that they made a mistake, guys, the best way for you to do it is to improve the man in the mirror.